Have you ever wondered what it means to belong so deeply to another person that even death itself could not separate the two? In some corners of history, that belonging took on a hauntingly literal form. For there were times and places where when a man died, his wife was expected to die with him. Not through illness or coincidence, but by custom, by ritual, by the quiet, unyielding rules of her community. Today, we are going to drift slowly into that world. A world of earth and ritual, of silence and expectation. We'll walk carefully through the past, where the idea of love, duty, and death intertwined in unsettling ways, and where the question of what it meant to be a wife was answered very differently than it is today. For most of human history, marriage was less about romance, and more about continuity. Families and villages survived through ties of kinship. A wife was not only a companion but also a guardian of her husband's lineage, his household, his ancestors. And yet, in certain cultures, this duty was thought to extend beyond life itself. If the husband died, the wife was sometimes expected to join him in death, so that he would not face the afterlife alone. This practice appeared in different forms across the world. In the great kingdoms of ancient Mesopotamia, in the ritual fires of India, and even in the royal courts of China. Though each version was unique, the theme was the same. The woman's life was bound to her husband's, all the way to the grave. Imagine for a moment a quiet village on the plains of Mesopotamia, around 4,000 years ago. A nobleman has died. His household gathers for the funeral. The mourners walk slowly, carrying jars of oil, baskets of food, and bundles of cloth. The air smells faintly of incense, heavy and sweet. But among the procession is not just one body to be laid to rest. Alongside the man, his wife, or in some cases multiple wives and servants, are prepared to follow. Sometimes they were given a drink, perhaps wine laced with something stronger. Sometimes they were simply sealed within the tomb, to lie beside him in silence. To the community, this was not seen as cruelty, but as continuity. The household must remain whole, even in death. Centuries later, in ancient India, this practice took on another form, one you may have heard of, sati. When a husband died, his widow was sometimes expected to join him on the funeral pyre. The flames rose, the wood cracked and popped, and with it, the idea was that she showed ultimate devotion. While not every widow was forced, many were pressured by family or community. Some accounts suggest women were persuaded gently, others that they were bound more firmly to their fate. In Imperial China, particularly among royalty, wives and concubines were sometimes buried alive within great tombs. The walls of those chambers still stand today, silent and cold, where women once sat in the dark with their husband's body. Archaeologists have found evidence of hairpins, silk robes, and ornaments left behind, as if the women entered death much as they had lived, ornamented but voiceless. The thread of this practice stretches across centuries, sometimes fading, sometimes returning in new guises. In Mesopotamia, these burials largely disappeared as empires shifted and new religions grew, though the traces remain in ancient tombs. In India, sati lingered for centuries, often among the higher castes until the 19th century. The British, disturbed by the practice, outlawed it in 1829, though rare cases continued into the 20th century. In China, the entombment of wives and servants declined after the Han Dynasty, though echoes of it survived in legend and poetry. And elsewhere, similar customs flickered in and out of human history. In Norse sagas, there are whispers of women sacrificed to join great chieftains. In Africa, some tribal kings were buried with wives or attendants. The pattern was not confined to one place, but spread like a shadow across cultures, each expressing the idea in its own way. What must it have felt like to live as a woman in such a society? To know that your life might not be your own, even in death. For many, it was not thought of as cruelty. It was simply what was done. From a young age, girls would have heard the stories. They might have seen an aunt or a neighbor vanish into the fire or the tomb. And so, the idea settled into daily life like the weather, unavoidable, unquestioned. On the day itself, the rituals were careful, almost tender. Neighbors might dress the widow in her finest clothes. She might be adorned with flowers, her hair combed, her hands painted with oils. Food offerings were placed beside her, as if to soften the journey. In some cases, songs were sung, slow, droning chants to guide her into the afterlife. In others, silence ruled. Only the crackle of fire or the dull thud of earth being shoveled into the grave. It is hard for us today to imagine the quiet acceptance such women must have carried. Perhaps some resisted. Perhaps others went with a kind of weary pride. But always it was framed not as her death, but as her duty, a final act of service. And yet, like so many traditions, it faded. Bit by bit, century by century, people began to ask different questions. Must love mean possession? Must duty require death? Slowly, the answer shifted to no. Today, when we visit old temples, or walk through museum halls where ornaments from these women are displayed, we are struck by a strange mix of feelings. There is sadness, yes, for the lives cut short, but also a kind of quiet awe at the sheer weight of belief that once guided entire communities. The wives who were buried alive beside their husbands are long gone. Their tombs have crumbled, their fires burned out, but their memory lingers as a whisper, reminding us how differently humans have understood loyalty, love, and the boundaries of life itself. And perhaps, as we close our eyes and drift into sleep, we might reflect on how fragile those boundaries still are, and how precious it is that today, love can mean walking beside someone, not into the grave but into the simple, ordinary days of life.